My Jeep Wrangler TJ was leaking fluid by the passenger rear tire. You can see it there on the tire and around the brake and axle housing. So I'm going to put a seal and a new bearing in the axle housing. Buzz the wheel off. Got it up on jack stands. Just using an impact and a 3/4 inch socket. Get that out of the way. We'll pull the brake drum off. Once I get it off, you'll see it's just covered with fluid. So the first thing I did when I got it off was cleaned it up. I just sprayed it with cleaner degreaser and then some brake clean, kind of wiped it down just so it wasn't completely filthy when I was working on it. Then you got to move underneath. To get the axle out, you've got to get inside the differential. So I take the cover off with a 1/2 inch socket. I'm using an air ratchet. You'll want a pan ready underneath. So once you pull this cover off, it's going to leak all the differential fluid into the pan. I put a bolt back in loose up top, then pry the cover loose, letting all that fluid come out. Just pry it loose with a screwdriver. Once it stops dripping, then you can take that last bolt out and move it off to the side. Got to get in here and take a big pin out between the axles. It holds the spider gears in place, and it also holds the axles from moving in too far. And once we do that, then you can move the axle in and take the clip off of it. To pull that big pin out, you got to take this little locking pin bolt out. I used a 1/4 inch 12-point box end wrench. It's kind of a weird bolt. It's got a 12-point head on it, so make sure you got the right tool because you could easily strip this thing. It's going to be tight. And it comes out, and it's kind of an odd bolt. The threads are all the way up by the head, and then there's just pin that goes into the larger pin. Keeps it from falling out. And now I'm going to pull that pin out. That's the one that goes between the spider gears and also holds the axles out. Then I can just push the axle in, and then actually that clip just fell out once I pushed the axle in. It's kind of hard to see. Here I'm trying to give you a view of the end of the axle, the right axle there sticking out in from the right. There's a groove in it. That's where that clip goes. Once the axle slides in, it'll fall right out. Once that clips out, then the axle slides right out. And we can take the bearing and seal out. The book says that you can take both out at the same time using an inner bearing removal tool and a slide hammer. But I beat on it for a long time and it would not come out. Just slip that inner bearing removal tool in, tighten the nut, and then slide that hammer back and forth. You might get lucky and it'll pull both the seal and the bearing out at the same time, but I did not have that luck. So I had to take it back off and then hit the seal with a chisel and hammer until I could get it beat up enough that I could pull it out of there with some pliers. It was a flange seal, so it was easy enough to just peel it inward and then pull it out. Then once I got that out, then I went back and put the slide hammer back on with the inner bearing removal tool, and it popped it right out. Get a better look at how this bearing removal tool works. When I loosen the nut, you can see it fold over. That allows the bearing to slip in and out off of it. I got my new bearing. I bought mine at Morris 4x4 Center. I'm sure any parts place could give it to you. Then you find a socket or a piece of pipe that's about that same OD. Tap it in with a hammer. No big wax, just kind of nice and easy. Keep an eye on it, make sure it's going in straight. When you get it all the way in, it'll sound different. It'll tap against the relief in the axle housing. It'll sound a little different. You'll know it's in there. I just make one quick run all the way around it. Make sure it's all the way in. Then I got my new seal. Got that one in Morris 4x4 center 2. Same technique. Big socket or pipe. Tap, tap, tap. Try not to beat up the... This is a much softer case. Try not to bend it. Just going to tap that in until it's flush with the outside of the axle housing. Then I'm going to clean up the axle where the seal and bearing run. Spray a little solvent on it. Rub it down with some Scotch-Brite. A little more solvent on there to wash it away. And wipe it down with a rag. It should be good to go. Just lube the inside of the new seal. Slide the axle in. When you get the axle all the way in, make sure you don't rotate it inside the spider gears, because you will knock the spider gears out since that center pin and clip and all that aren't in there. I'm going to put that clip back on the axle, that C clip. As soon as I get it in the slot, and I just push the axle back out and it'll stay in. And then that center pin is next. The end with the little hole in it goes towards you so that you can get the locking bolt to slide through that little hole. Putting the locking bolt in now. I'll tighten it with that same 1/4 inch wrench, 12-point box end. Make sure you get it good and tight. And I cleaned the differential housing up, razor blade, scraper, solvent, rags. Came back with some black RTV. Same thing with the pumpkin cover. I cleaned it up to get it all clean and dry, and then you don't need a gasket. It's just RTV. Put all the bolts back in. Trying not to slide it around too much while I'm putting it on. Go back and torque them all. 1/2 inch socket. Then we'll have to fill it with differential lube, 80-90 weight. Take a couple bottles, squeeze it into that hole. There's a rubber plug I've already pulled out until it drips. Wait till it stops dripping. Snap the plug back in. You're done underneath. Brake drum back on. And the wheel and tire, and you're done. It's not that big a project. Don't be scared. Jeep on.